Disney Disability Access Service changes exclude thousands. One disabled weekly park goer's opinion. Physical disabilities don't matter. That is exactly what Disney is saying to us with the changes they've made to their Disability Access Service, otherwise known as DAS. Starting in May or June, depending on what coast you're on, Disney, with its, quote, unwavering commitment to provide a welcoming and inclusive environment, end quote, will only approve DAS for those with developmental disabilities, such as autism or similar. Everyone that has any sort of physical disability or chronic illness will have to wait in the regular physical queue lines. Some are applauding this change, thinking it will weed out those who lie to get DAS. They are misinformed. This is a huge blow to thousands of frequent park guests with physical disabilities. DAS has been excessively abused for a long time, with levels of those faking disability reaching all-time highs after Disney got rid of free FastPass. I understand and commend Disney's desire to fix this. It is disgusting the amount of people who abuse this system on an everyday basis. However, this is not the correct way to stop people from doing so. Guests with developmental disabilities will still be evaluated by quick observation and a few questions. No proof of disability is necessary. As a weekly park goer, I would say more than half of those abusing DAS are parents claiming to have developmentally disabled children. These people are going to continue to cheat the system when they don't have to provide any proof that their child is actually disabled. Proof is necessary to obtain DAS in every Disney park outside the U.S. It is not against privacy laws to ask for proof of disability when someone is asking for an extra service to accommodate them. Think of using a handicap spot, a service provided for the disabled. Can you park in a handicap spot without your plate or placard displaying that a doctor has deemed this medically necessary? No, you can't. You provide the proof that professionals have approved this. How is asking for proof at Disney any different? Most people with actual disabilities are more than happy to provide proof. If Disney wants to crack down on liars, they need to require documentation of the disability. Disney's main reasoning for excluding those with physical disabilities from DAS is that, quote, all queues are handicapped accessible, end quote, with some exceptions. To be very clear, this means that lines are wheelchair accessible, not ECV, electronic convenience vehicle mobility scooter accessible. Some lines can accommodate ECVs, but not all. Most things, especially at the Disneyland Resort, are incredibly tight. So, will we be required to switch to a wheelchair for rides that cannot accommodate our scooters? This would mean, 1. Mobility-challenged people would be forced to get out of their proper mobility devices and into a wheelchair at many rides. Not only should we be able to stay in our prescribed device, but there will be many more accidents and injuries with all of these people transferring from one device to another all day. Wheelchairs may also not be as supportive as another assistive device. I know I need my entire back and neck supported as much as possible, which a wheelchair does not provide. 2. We will need to wait for a wheelchair to become available. Most rides have 1 or 2 wheelchairs at their disposal, so the disabled will now have an even greater wait time, in addition to the queue time, lightning lane, because of course that's mixed with the handicap line, and the handicapped loading line, because there's only 1 or a few handicapped vehicles per ride. That's 4 separate lines for us to wait in, instead of the usual 3. Anyone who says the disabled get front-of-the-line access is completely oblivious. 3. What happens when you're alone? Are the physically challenged expected to push themselves in the wheelchair? This is not possible for most of us. This issue comes up for me at Universal Studios when I frequently go alone. There are 3 rides where I cannot use my scooter in the queue. I have to transfer to a wheelchair and then wait for an employee to push me through the queue. There are not employees staffed to do this. I've had to wait up to an extra 30 minutes just to have a park employee available to take me through the queue. And of course, that's at a park that is far less busy. This will be entirely impossible to deal with at Disney parks. Even though you may use an assistive device, it doesn't mean that you're capable of staying in that device for the entire queue. Many disabilities cause severe pain, and staying in one position in a wheelchair or scooter for an extended amount of time can be excruciating. Some need to walk around every few minutes. Some need to get their feet elevated. Some have back problems or joint and connective tissue disorders that require constant adjustment to their position. The list of possibilities is endless. Disability can also mean gastrointestinal issues, nausea, vomiting, bathroom urgency problems, to name a few. Please remember that these guests are not sick or contagious. These are symptoms or side effects that they deal with every single day of their lives. Disney states that they will allow those guests out of line for bathroom urgency needs. If you're familiar with Disney lines and have ever had diarrhea, you should know that this is laughable. 1. You need to find a cast member, or CM, and tell them you need to leave. It's not like the queues are full of CMs. They're at the start and nearest to the finish. The disabled are now supposed to push ourselves through hundreds of people before we can even start heading for the bathroom. 2. If you're in a mobility device such as wheelchair or ECV, you cannot simply exit the line. Most lines are made up of immovable metal bars and posts. There are a few places along the queue where there are exit gates, but they could be quite far away or completely inaccessible, depending on where you are in line. 3. The disabled would then need to get themselves and their vehicles back to where they were in line. How are we to do that exactly? Lines will be constantly disrupted by people with heavy motorized vehicles needing to use the facilities. If you're moving scooters and wheelchairs in a tight queue, how are you going to avoid running over people's feet or injuring them in some other way? Let me tell you that it's nearly impossible. There have been times that I've had to exit a queue in my scooter and people had to climb on the sides of the queue, which not only isn't allowed, but it's dangerous. This is why they don't put ECVs in regular queue lines. 4. Now, instead of those with serious gastrointestinal problems being able to get to a restroom when necessary, you're going to have bathroom accidents in the lines. Not only is this a biohazard for all guests and CMs, but this level of public humiliation for the chronically ill and disabled is nothing short of cruel. Disney offers these suggestions to the thousands of disabled people whom they've excluded from DOS access. 1. Rider Switch, a program for parents of children who aren't big enough to ride. This is only available for parents switching out so they can both have the chance to ride when one has to stay behind to watch a small child. How does this apply to the disabled whatsoever? I have to have children to get some accessible access? 2. Single rider lines. I am not aware of any single rider lines that are accessible to me in a scooter. They usually involve stairs or very tight spaces. To my knowledge, you cannot use them with a wheelchair or ECV. So again, this is entirely unhelpful to many of the physically disabled. 3. Buy Genie Plus. I can't even begin to say how infuriating this suggestion is. Now, merely because I'm disabled, I should have to pay exorbitant amounts of money each and every time I go to the parks to accommodate my needs? That is not legal, first of all. You cannot make me pay more for what every able-bodied person can access. Why is Disney not suggesting Genie Plus to the developmentally disabled? Because it's infinitely absurd, regardless if you are developmentally or physically disabled. 4. Location return time. This will be available in Disneyland Park, as their queues are not ADA compliant. You will have to visit a ride, wait in line to talk to a CM, and get a return time to come back to that ride. A return time is the same length of time that the queue for that ride is. That sounds wonderful until you realize that instead of allowing us to book a return time on the Disney mobile app as we can now, the disabled will have to physically go to a ride's entrance to get a return time and then leave and go elsewhere where they can comfortably wait, such as near a bathroom or somewhere with seating, and then walk all the way back to the ride. And they have to do that at every single inaccessible ride all day long. How on earth does it make sense to make the physically disabled walk or move more than anyone else in the parks? It's preposterous. This policy will also make things in an already too tight and small Disneyland park even more of a nightmare. There will be long lines of wheelchairs and scooters at every ride waiting to get return times from cast members. It will clog up the walkways and leave no room for other guests to walk or, far more difficult, scoot by them. And of course, it's yet more lines for the handicapped to wait in all day. While those with DOS get to do it on the app in a few clicks, remaining where they are most comfortable until ride time. 5. Encourage other members of your party to make more space around you in line. This is not something you can do when you are on your own, as many frequent guests are. It's also incredibly difficult when the CMs at most every ride are constantly telling you to move up and fill in all available space. What about places like Haunted Mansion Hallway? It is absolutely impossible to give yourself some safe space around you in places like that. The opportunity for injury to the disabled is limitless. 6. Rent an ECV or wheelchair. Again, it is not the disabled's responsibility to spend more money to make a park accessible for them. The Disney wheelchairs and scooters may not be the correct assistance that a person needs and could ultimately injure them. Another issue is that guests may not need an assistive device at all times. Perhaps they are perfectly capable of using a cane most of the day, but cannot stand for very long queues. The person would now either have to rent a scooter and be denied the right to walk when they are able, or be stuck hauling a wheelchair around the parks all day and finding somewhere to park it when it's not needed. Would Disney like the stroller areas to be filled with people parking wheelchairs that they don't need at the moment? Or have the walkways and queues even more congested with unnecessary extra scooters? This could be easily avoided if those that can't stand for long periods of time could wait outside the regular queues where there is seating. 7. Break up your day with other offerings. Now Disney is telling the physically disabled to not go on rides as much? We have the right to choose what we want to do at Disney just like everyone else. We shouldn't have to stick to shows because we can't stay in a normal queue. The shows have queues too, of course, so this doesn't even make sense. Disneyland Resort has only a few shows to enjoy, and those shows can often be closed on weekdays. The disabled still pay full price for their tickets like everyone else. Disney should never suggest that they limit their time at park attractions. 8. Bring a toy. This is, of course, not at all helpful to the physically disabled. In fact, I've had many problems with kids that have toys in a line. Getting smacked with a lightsaber is always a joy. Kids throwing smaller toys, such as action figures, at you is always pleasant, too. I'm very lucky I haven't been injured by one of these toys. The bubble machines are a nuisance. Not only do I not want to be eating bubbles from the kid in front of me for the entire length of the queue, but the bubble soap can also be quite irritating to some people's skin, mine included. Encouraging more toys in line is detrimental to many. I'm not saying that kids shouldn't have toys in line. I'm saying that those of us that are extra fragile or can't properly get out of the way of an errant swing at head level, because if you're in an assistance vehicle, you are likely the height of a child, we shouldn't have to be enclosed in a queue with that danger for hours and hours throughout the day. Maybe if parents would pay attention to what their kids are doing instead of looking at their phones and not have them wave things around in tight spaces, I would feel differently. I would personally like to know what Disney plans to do about the kids behind me in line that consistently play with the oh-so-fun buttons on my oxygen machine that sits in my rear scooter basket. It happens most every week in the handicapped queues, and I have to pay strict attention to any child near me the entire time I wait to board a ride. I will not be able to stop children behind me if I am in a normal queue. I will have zero access to the back of my scooter where my oxygen concentrator is. I also cannot go through an entire queue facing behind me. I'm not physically able to do that, nor should anyone have to. In a loud queue, I may not be able to hear if a child pressed one of the buttons, meaning they could be changing the amount of oxygen I'm being supplied without me knowing it. This could be very dangerous for me. Again, maybe if parents watch their children, this could be avoided, but that's not the case. There are, of course, many other physical disabilities that severely limit a person's ability to be in a normal queue line that I haven't touched on. They're too innumerable to state. Disney has decided to ignore them all. If a system is getting abused, does it ever make sense to cut out half the people that need that system? No. That's not how things are done. We don't get suspended licenses because there are bad drivers out there. We don't go to jail because someone else committed a crime. No matter what the case, the many should not be punished for the crimes of the few. Actually physically disabled people that want to enjoy Disney are now unable to because some able-bodied people feel entitled enough to lie. I've been a happy pass holder for over a decade, but these new rules make it impossible for me to enjoy Disney any longer. The park will no longer be accessible for me and thousands like me. If this doesn't change before it is time to renew my pass, I will not be renewing, and I know many others won't as well. I will not visit Disney property ever again after my pass expiration until this policy is changed. I refuse to support a company that outright disregards the physically disabled. Disney completely lacks the understanding or care of the physical limitations and health issues of thousands that can be easily accommodated by continuing the service they have in place now. Disney just wants us to spend more money on their assistive devices and Genie Plus. Disney parks are an escape for thousands of disabled and chronically ill people. Some of us deal with amazing amounts of pain on a daily basis. We spend more time at doctors than doing anything else. We are trapped inside our houses, possibly alone, for a lot of our lives. Disney was a place to escape that depressing reality, to get outside, to see, and maybe even talk to, people, to forget the pain and misery of their daily lives with some Disney magic. There's nothing else like it in the world. The term Disney therapy is even commonly used by doctors. That's how beneficial this wonderful place can be for those dealing with the immense difficulty of chronic illness or disability. It was a place that helps to keep our spirits up in an otherwise painful, lonely, and discriminate world that we live in. I am utterly devastated and heartbroken to see Disney do this. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this. If this affects you or someone you know, or you happen to just be a caring person that this doesn't affect whatsoever, please share this, and more importantly, write to Disney to express your displeasure with their new DOS rules and tell them to make DOS available for all the disabled that need it. You can email them at disability.services@disneyland.com. Thank you for any support you can give.